Hello, this is Section 3, Roles and Templates. In this section, we will look at organizing tasks into roles, downloading roles from Ansible Galaxy, customizing roles with variables, building custom roles, using templates in roles, and template flow control. Organizing tasks into roles. In this video, we will look at roles, role components, and using roles in playbooks. Up until now, the playbooks we've been looking at have been relatively simple with only a few tasks. But as our work gets more complex and more realistic, we'll find that our playbooks grow until we have very many tasks and the playbook is cluttered and hard to maintain. What we would like is a way to declutter our playbook, take some of the tasks and move them out into other files. We'd like to do this in a way that groups together related tasks. We often find that we need to install a piece of software and then configure it and then start a service. All of those tasks go together. They're grouped together logically. It would be nice to be able to combine them in some way. This is exactly what roles are for. Roles allow us to organize tasks for clarity and reusability. We start out by collecting up related tasks, putting them together. We then put them into their own subdirectory for that role. Into that same subdirectory, we put any files that belong to that role, configuration files, for example, and we put variables that belong to that role. All of those together become a reusable package. We can pick up that role, move it to another system, use it there. We can use variables to override its behavior and customize it. It allows us to create this reusable unit of automation that we can move around and use. A role is really just a directory with a number of subdirectories. All roles will at least have a tasks subdirectory. This is the main entry point, the actions to complete when Ansible runs the role. Going along with the tasks, we often find handlers. Handlers are conditional tasks that run only if notified. We'll look at that in an upcoming video. In addition to the tasks, we also often have files that are associated with the role. There are two directories. We can keep those in. The files subdirectory is used for files we deploy to the remote system as is, using the copy module that we've seen before. The templates directory is for files that need to be processed first to do variable substitution. We'll look at the template module in an upcoming video. The templates directory is used for those templates. There are also two directories we can use to store variables. Defaults are configuration variables that are lower priority, and vars are configuration variables that are higher priority. The only difference is that the ones in vars are more difficult to override from outside the role. It's much more common to just use defaults. Finally, we have the meta subdirectory. This is important when we deploy our role to Ansible Galaxy, which we'll look at in the next video, because it allows us to specify documentation and dependencies so that if someone installs that role, they get the necessary dependencies as well. There are several directories here that a role can contain. Every role at least contains tasks. Now that we've defined what a role is and what the components are, we should look at how we use a role from our playbook. On this slide, you can see the playbook organization we've seen before. On the top, you see what we have been doing until now. we've just been listing tasks in the play. On the bottom, you see how we change the play if we're using roles. Instead of listing tasks in the play, we list roles one by one as a list. Each item is usually just a string with the name of the role, as you see here. It can also be a dictionary. This is one place we can use variables to override the behavior of the role. You can see that when we use a play with roles, we're pretty much just sticking to having Ansible run roles. However, there might be cases where we need to run certain tasks either before or after the roles are run. Ansible supports pre-tasks, which are tasks that run before the roles, and post-tasks, which are tasks that run after the roles. Both of these are optional. As we saw with tasks, Ansible works from top to bottom with roles. So the first role in the list would be run first, followed by the next one, followed by the next one, and they're run sequentially. Now that we've seen the role components and we've seen how to reference a role in our playbook, let's look at an example role and how we would run a playbook containing it. What I've done for this video is I've created a role that captures the Java installation tasks we saw in the previous section. I started out by creating a roles directory at the same level as the playbook. Within that roles directory, I have a directory called Java. That Java directory contains all of the subdirectories that we talked about for the components. In this case, we only needed tasks and defaults, so those are the only directories that you see. Within tasks, I have a file called main.yaml. This is the main entry point for the role. It's the file that Ansible looks for first when it looks in the tasks directory to see what actions to take. You'll notice that the main.yaml is just a list of tasks. Because this is inside a role, inside a tasks subdirectory, Ansible already knows these are tasks, so I don't have to include the tasks item, the key. I just list the tasks along the left-hand column. So these hyphens in column 1, each one of those represents a separate task. You'll notice that just like when we use the tasks in the playbook, I can refer to variables, as I've done here with Java version. This variable substitution will work the same way it did we saw before. Now, of course, if I'm going to declare a variable like this, I should provide a default, if possible, so that users of this role can get some sensible default behavior without having to specify the variable. The way that I do that is by creating a file under defaults called main.yaml. And you'll notice that this is just a YAML variable file, exactly the same as what we've seen before. This provides the default value for this particular variable. In an upcoming video, we'll look at overriding this value. Now that I have this role, the playbook becomes very simple. All I do is specify a play, include the roles key, and then provide a list of the roles that I want Ansible to run. And Ansible is smart enough to look in the roles directory in the same directory as the playbook and find the Java role in there. As a result, if we go over to our terminal, if we run this, we'll be able to see it run this role and install Java across our 3 virtual machines. So the way that this works is very similar to what we've seen before. The one thing that you'll notice that's different is that each of our tasks has a little statement up front that indicates what role it's coming from. It then works its way through each of the tasks in the role, in exactly the same way it ran the tasks in order when they were directly in the playbook. And the result is that we've done this Java install just as if we'd had those tasks right there in our playbook. That concludes our introduction to roles.